Hey there, guitar fanatics. I am super fired up for this video because we're going to do a deep dive into one of the coolest, flashiest, and most useful ways of getting around the fretboard, and that is legato style playing. In contrast to the percussive, super defined sound of alternate picking or even economy picking where we pick every note, and it sounds amazing, don't get me wrong, legato is all about playing the majority of notes in a phrase or passage using hammer-ons, pull-offs, and slides. The end result is a smoother, more liquidy sound. So if your legato playing is weak or you always wanted to learn legato but you never got around to it, I know these exercises are going to help you develop a killer legato technique. So when I think about legato, my mind immediately goes to guitar gods like Eddie Van Halen or Steve Vai, or all of the shredders from the shrapnel area like Richie Kotzen, Brett Garsett, and the immortal Sean Lane. To this day, I can remember the first time that I heard Flying in a Blue Dream by Joe Satriani, and that song had such a huge influence on me and the way that I think about and play guitar. Present-day players like Rick Graham, Nick Johnston, and the amazing Guthrie Govan have ridiculous legato chops. And the fusion guitarist Tom Quayle has taken legato playing into his own space with his ridiculous rhythmic control and unbelievable harmonic knowledge. And of course we have to mention the all-time legato great Alan Holdsworth, who played insane long flowing lines over these incredible chord changes. Some of the greatest guitar players of today are still amazed and dumbfounded about what Alan was doing 40 years ago. So what do all these great players have in common? Well, they had to start somewhere. And that's what we're going to do today. If you're new to legato, we're going to give you a super solid foundation to move on from. If you can already play a little legato, these exercises are going to take you to a far more advanced level. Let's start by talking about some technique basics. When we play legato, we're going to be making the notes ring out mostly with hammer-ons, pull-offs, and slides. We're going to be working our fretting hand pretty hard, and if you get tense, it's very, very easy to get fatigued playing legato. So it's critically important to keep your fretting hand relaxed. One of the big things that'll keep your fretting hand relaxed is to minimize the movement of your fingers. You want to keep your fingers as close as possible to the strings while you play. You don't want to lift them off too far. A huge source of wasted energy is lifting your fingers further away from the strings than is necessary. Another huge energy waster is overdoing the motion of pull-offs. I've worked with students before that were exaggerating the pull-off motion so hard that you could actually hear the strings snapping when they do the pull-off, and their fingers would move multiple string spaces away from the note that they were pulling off from. This is going to wear your hand out, and it's just not necessary when you're playing legato, especially since most of the time when we're doing legato, we're playing with distortion. A great practice tip: videotape yourself playing, or even go old school and practice in front of a mirror. Play through these exercises, and first of all, make sure that you're keeping your fingertips as close to the strings as possible. The other thing you want to strive for is to keep your motions as small as possible when you're doing pull-offs. There's really no reason to pull off and move further than the string that's adjacent to the note that you just pulled off of. Oh, and lastly, it's probably a really good idea to warm up your hands and stretch before you practice legato. So on to our first practice hack. Now, I'm making the assumption here that you know the major scale and you know it in 3-note per string forms. But don't panic if you don't, because I'm going to provide diagrams to follow along with. To start off, we're going to get used to playing legato patterns on just one string at a time, and we're going to be using the G major scale in this first series of exercises. So the first of our one-string drills is what I'm going to call 5 notes and slide. We're going to start at the 3rd fret of the low E string, and we're going to play G, A, and B. So I picked the G note. You could hammer on, then hammer on to A, hammer on to B, pull off to A, and pull off down to G. So there's our 5 notes. Next, we're going to slide up to the 5th fret, and then we're going to play A, B, C, and back down to A. and we take that all the way up the fretboard. Now, if you want, you can pick the first note, and then after that, you really ought to be able to keep the string ringing with slides and your hammer-ons and pull-offs. We're going to refer to that as fretting hand articulation. And you're going to find the way that you manipulate the strings with your fretting hand has way more influence on your sound than you may have previously thought. Now, with any of the drills we talk about today, the major scale is a great place to start, but you can and you should use these drills with every scale and mode that you know. Now that we can do this drill ascending, let's try it descending. So now that you can do the drill ascending and descending, you should move on and you should practice it on each string individually across the fretboard. Now here's a variation on that first drill. We're gonna creatively call this 7 notes in slide, and it's really identical to the first concept, but we're gonna change up the pattern that we're playing a little bit. Remember how I mentioned the intro about creating patterns to play lots of notes on a single string? Well, we're gonna get started with that now, and the new pattern goes like this. We're gonna play a starting note, and then we're gonna hammer onto a note a third above it. So if I start at G, I would then hammer on to B, and then pull off back to G. Then we hammer on to the A, then B, pull off to A, and end back up at G. There's our 7 notes, and just like the previous exercise, we slide then into the next position. And we take that all the way up the fretboard. And of course, we can descend also. And like the previous variation, you're going to need to practice that on each string. So a couple of super important details. First of all, we want to try to keep our volume as similar as possible with each note. Keep in mind, we're going to be using several different kinds of attack when we play legato. We might pick a note to get things started. We're hammering on, we're pulling off. There's going to be times when we might use hybrid picking to help us articulate notes. And the goal is to make it sound very seamless and very even. So you really got to use your ears and your touch. Detail number 2 is muting. We want to make sure that we're not getting unwanted string noise. And something I want you to try with these 1-string exercises is actually muting with the index finger of your fretting hand. So when I'm playing any of the notes on the low E string, I'm actually letting the pad of my fretting hand index finger touch the A string. So I can play any of the notes on the E string. And if I pick the note on the A string, it's muted. So if my pull-off accidentally brushes against that A string, it's not going to sound out. This probably sounds super complicated, and it's going to feel awkward when you first try it. But it's surprisingly intuitive once you work with it a little bit. Let's move on to some 2-string patterns now. We're turning up the heat a little bit. So our second level practice hack is 2-string drills. 2-string drills are super important because we're going to confront head-on one of the biggest challenges of playing in the legato style. And that's getting all the notes to ring out cleanly when you're switching strings. When we move from string to string, it's of the utmost importance to get the first note we play to sound out clearly. And after that, it's usually a piece of cake. Let's take a look at our first 2-string drill. So this drill has a 7-note pattern. We're going to play 3 ascending notes on the starting string. So in this case, we're going to play G, A, and B. We're then going to play 1 note on the A string. This is a C note at the 3rd fret. And then we're going to go back to the low E and descend B, A, and G. And like our previous drills, we take that all the way up and down the fretboard. can do it on each string set. Now, as far as switching strings, there are a few different ways to execute that, and they're all okay. I've seen incredible players use each method. The first way I'd like you to practice it, to really develop your technique, is to hammer on the first note of the second string. Now, I believe Greg Howe coined the term hammer on from nowhere, and this is what we're doing here. We're going to get all of our articulation from hammer-ons, pull-offs, and slides. Another way of doing it is to use a little upward sweep, and it's just a brush of the strings to help sound out the note on the A string and the first note back to the low E. Just remember, we're trying to keep our volume level equal, even, so don't get too aggressive with the pick stroke. So we would do that like this. I'm going to actually start the pattern by touching the pick, you're doing a very light pick on the G, 2 hammer-ons, and then I'm going to play the C note and then the B note back on the low E string with an upward sweep. A third way of doing it is to hybrid pick. So we're going to pluck the note on the A string with the middle finger, and we're going to brush the first note back on that low E with the pick. So check this out. Again, all of these methods work, so experiment. And it should, of course, now go without saying, practice this across all string sets. Another cool 2-string drill consists of 12 notes and then a shift. It starts out just like the previous drill. We're going to have 3 notes ascending, 1 note on the adjacent string, and 3 notes descending on the original string. But then we're going to go ahead and ascend right up the 3 notes on the first string and 3 notes on the second string. So this first pattern, we're going to have G, A, B, C, B, A, G, A, B, C, D, E. And then we're going to shift positions and do it again. This is an awesome variation because the patterns aren't all the same. You're going to have to use your ear, you're going to have to adapt your fingerings on the fly, just like real life playing. So make sure to practice it descending also. And then one last 2-string variation, and I call this the double shift. We're going to be playing 6-note groupings. So the first one, we ascend, so we're going to play G, A, B, C, D, E, and then we're going to shift up with our pinky to the 9th fret, and we're going to descend F sharp, E, D, and C, B, A. And then we're going to shift up to the 7th fret with our index finger, and we're going to play B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Then we're going to shift again up to the A at the 12th fret, and we're going to play A, G, F sharp, E, D, C. Here we go. Now, of course, we want to practice it all the way up and down the fretboard, and we want to practice it on every set of 2 strings. Now, you can really start to hear some of that Satriani sound when we speed this up. And now it's time for our 3rd level of practice hacks. We're going to take some of these patterns across all 6 strings at once. So for our first variation, we're going to be using a 12-note pattern. The 12-note pattern goes like this. We're going to start off and play that 7-note pattern that we did in our second exercise back on 1 string. So we're going to play G, A, B, C on the A string, and then descend back down, B, A, G, and then we're going to play up A, B, C, D, and E. So So we end up on the E at the 7th fret of the A string, and we're going to drop back down to the C note at the 3rd fret of the A string, and we're going to play that same 12-note pattern, but this time on the A and D strings. Then we go to the D string, the F sharp, and across the fretboard. So let's try this whole thing. Now, when we get to the high E string, I'm going to shift up to the D note, and we're going to play that same pattern descending. And we end up back at our starting note. So lastly, we're going to play a little back and forth pattern of 9 notes on each string, and we're going to take it all the way across the fretboard, ascending and descending. So this pattern is very similar to the 7-note pattern we played in our 1-string exercise. But we're going to add 2 more notes by ascending again and playing the 2 notes above our starting note, our root note. So I'm going to play fret 3, 7, 3, 5, 7, 5, 3, 5, 7. Then we're going to ascend to the next string, next string, next string, next string, and the next string. And once we play that last pattern on the high E, we're going to shift positions and play it in a descending fashion. And once again, we're back to our starting note, that G. And as you can hear it, it's pretty easy when you're playing 9 notes on a single string to start to get some speed. So once you get comfortable with this pattern, challenge yourself to start on a different starting note within the key. For instance, you could start on the C note at the 8th fret. So when you can start on any note of the G major scale on the low E string, or really any note of the G major scale on any of the strings, and play through the pattern without hesitation or getting stuck or getting lost, you know you're really starting to get it, and you're starting to achieve what I call fretboard freedom. And hopefully that's a goal that we're all shooting for. So there it is. 3 levels of legato practice hacks with multiple variations for each. Listen to some of those players I mentioned for great examples of legato playing. And of course, there are countless other great players that are experts at legato also. I just don't have time to mention them all. I hope you got a lot out of this video. Practice hard, have fun with it. You're going to be a legato wizard in no time at all. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.